Racism is unfair treatment based on skin color or background. It creates divisions and limits opportunities. Though it changes over time, it still affects people today. Overcoming racism means treating everyone with fairness and respect. Historically, China's interaction with African students in the 1960s and 70s revealed tensions as African students faced discrimination despite government efforts to foster solidarity with developing nations. Anti-black racism, for instance, has been influenced by beauty standards favoring lighter skin and remnants of colonial-era scientific racism. Additionally, China's ethno-nationalism has sometimes marginalized ethnic minorities like Uyghurs and Tibetans.
In the USA, racism is deeply intertwined with its history of slavery, segregation, and systematic inequality, from the forced removal of Native Americans to the enslavement of African people. The foundation of the country were built on racial hierarchies. Even after the abolition of slavery, Jim Crow laws enforced segregation and limited opportunities for Black Americans.
In China, racism is often viewed as a byproduct of ethnocentrism and cultural superiority. Incidents of discrimination, particularly against African communities, have drawn international criticism. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, reports of racial profiling and mistreatment of Africans in Guangzhou sparked outrage from African nations. Additionally, China's treatment of ethnic minorities such as the Uyghurs has been widely condemned as a human rights issue. These events contribute to a perception of systemic racism and ethno-nationalism in China.
The United States of America is often criticized for its ongoing struggles with racial discrimination, particularly in policing and social justice. Movements like Black Lives Matter have brought international attention to these issues, highlighting the persistence of racial disparities. Survey shows that people in many countries view racial discrimination as a more serious problem in the USA than in their own societies.
In China, the government has implemented policies aimed at promoting ethnic equality, such as the Law on Regional National Autonomy, which grants certain rights to ethnic minorities. However, international organizations have criticized China's treatment of minorities like the Uyghurs and Tibetans, citing human rights violations. Socially, racism against Black individuals and ethnic minorities has been growing concern, especially on social media platforms. Human Rights Watch has urged the Chinese government to address the online hate speech and promote tolerance. Despite these efforts, ethno-nationalism and cultural superiority remains challenges in combating racism.
In the USA, the government has taken steps to address systemic racism, such as Executive Order 13985, which aims to advance racial equity across federal agencies. Movements like Black Lives Matter have played a significant role in raising awareness and pushing for reforms in policing and social justice. However, systemic racism persists, particularly in law enforcement and the criminal justice system, as highlighted by the UN mechanism on racial justice. Socially, the USA has seen widespread activism and public discourse on racism, reflecting a society grappling with its historical and ongoing inequalities.
The comparative study of racism in China and the USA underscores the complexity of the issue. While the manifestations and responses differ, both nations grapple with deep-seated challenges. Addressing this divide requires international cooperation, education, and the promotion of empathy to build a more inclusive and global society. I think it's time to eradicate or to eliminate racism. It's time to tolerate each other's beliefs and differences.
So para sa akin, ang racism ay ang pagtrato ng hindi pantay dahil sa pinagmulan ng isang tao.
Racism can make it harder for people of color to get good jobs, get a fair trial, or even feel safe in their communities.
So, for me, racism is prejudice and discrimination based on race. Example na lang natin, verbal harassment or for instance, yung pagtawag natin ng mga offensive names na hindi naman dapat. And then also yung stereotyping, syempre number 1 na yan. Kasi yung parang pag nakita mo lang yung isang tao is ginajudge mo siya without knowing na yung person na ba yun or mabait siya or may pinagdadaanan. So this example illustrate impacting of student academic, pwedeng mental health, and also for overall experience na rin niya dun sa environment na kinakaanohan.
Racism is when someone is treated unfairly or discriminated because they race or ethnicity. It can happen in many places like schools, workplace, and even in every interactions.
Actually, the consequences of racism is far-reaching, causing emotional and psychological trauma, social and economic inequality, and limiting access to opportunities and resources. Ultimately, combating racism requires education, awareness, policy changes, and community engagement.